Resourceful Designer, episode 201, 10 Signs You Should Raise Your Design Rates.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer Podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. He closes the bathroom door even when nobody else is at home. Mark Dacote.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. In this episode, I'm going to talk about things to look out for that indicate it's time to raise your design prices. I'm also going to share a tip of the week for file management proficiency. Now, what have I been up to this past week? Well, I've been working on a couple of websites, actually 3 websites to be precise, 2 of them for a client and 1 of them for me. I'm actually building a sample site for my podcast branding company. Right now, I've been directing people that want to know what a site looks like to my current client site, but I want to actually build a sample site for them to look at that offers all the features that they can possibly have on the website or that I offer to them. So I'm in the process of doing that. I should be done that hopefully by next week, and then roll that out to part of my sales funnel. I also did some work on a couple of podcast cover arts and began laying out some stuff for a dining guide I'm working on. I haven't actually received all the content for the dining guide yet, but I started just playing around with layouts to see how it'll be. That'll be a print job, and I'm just toying around with the size of the booklet. They're giving me free rein on it, so what sort of format I want it in. Is it going to be a fold out? Is it going to be a multi-page book? Is it going to be landscape or portrait? I'm just fooling around looking for inspiration for that job. Now, something else I've been up to is reading all the results from the survey I asked you to complete last week. And that was a survey on just what you think of the podcast. Now, if you haven't completed it, you still can by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/200survey. That's 200 survey. And it's just 4 simple questions for you to answer. And I've been going through them, and it's funny. I kind of knew this would happen. I asked the questions, what do you like about the podcast? What don't you like? What you'd like me to change about the podcast? And I got some responses saying that they find the podcast is too short, and other people saying that the podcast is too long. Some people say that the what have I been up to section is too short. They want to know more, not just what projects, but they want me to go into more detail about the projects. And other people say they have no interest in what I'm working on. They want me to eliminate that altogether. So I knew that sort of thing would happen, but a lot of the questions I'm getting answers for, or a lot of the answers, I should say, are giving me a lot of insight into what people want with the podcast. More guests was a consensus. A lot of people said they really liked it when I have guests on. I've done 200 episodes so far, and I think I've only had 5 or 6 guests on the podcast. So definitely something I want to look into more. I don't want this to become an interview podcast. If I'm going to have a guest on, it's because there's going to be a certain topic I want to cover, and I would get somebody on who is more qualified to talk on that topic than I am. So I am looking, I do have a few ideas for people, so there will be more guests in the future. But for the most part, it's still just going to be a solo podcast with me. But that was one of the recommendations that quite a few people put in. Another thing is more questions of the week. I stopped doing questions of the week, and a lot of people are saying that they really like them and they wish I would bring them back. But the problem with question of the week is I don't have the questions. When I decided to stop, I said, please keep submitting your question, and once I have a bunch, I'll bring it back. I haven't received a single question since that time. So I love answering questions that are submitted to me, but I can't do it if I don't have any. So if you want to hear more questions, then you need to submit some. And the way to do that is by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback and fill out that form with your question, and I'll gladly answer it on the podcast. But without questions coming in, that's a feature of the show that will not be around. And the other thing is resources. People are saying that they don't like that I keep repeating some resources. But the fact is, after 200 episodes, that's a lot of resources. And yes, I've repeated a bunch of them several times, but still, it's hard to come up with new resources. Especially, I don't like sharing resources that I'm not familiar with. I have in the past shared some that I don't really use, but most of the resources I talk about are all things that I use. Like, there are plenty of really great WordPress themes available, but I'm not familiar with them, so I'm not going to share them as a resource. So that does limit what I talk about, because if I can't promote it honestly, I'm not going to share it on the show. So I just want to thank everyone who has filled out the survey, and it's not too late. You can still do it. I'll leave it open for a little bit longer. but it does give me a clear vision of some of the things that I'm going to do, and you might see some minor changes to the podcast in the future. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention briefly is the Resourceful Designer community. We just passed the 1-year mark. The community was launched last January in 2019, so now it's January 2020 when I'm putting this episode out, and the community is a year old. And wow, what a great place it has turned into. Now, we have several new members in the community. We're still trying to get to know them, get to know their business, how they work, what they're up to, what sort of help they need. But those that have been around for a year, we have really, really gotten to know each other. We consider ourselves friends. We joke around with each other. We know about each other's businesses. We trust each other with confidential information. It has really become a tight-knit community of designers all wanting to help each other and their business grow. And everybody who is in there says that it's a valuable part of their business strategy. Now, if you want to know more, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community, where you can join and see what it's all about. And now this week's tip of the week. And this week's tip is aliases. Or I guess if you're a Windows user, it would be called shortcuts. Now, what are these? It's funny how many people that use a computer do not know about aliases or shortcuts. Now, for the rest of this, I'm just going to call them aliases. Just know that on a Mac, they're called aliases. On a Windows, they're called shortcuts. And when I say shortcuts, I don't mean like key commands and stuff like that. What I'm talking about is file or folder aliases. And what they are, call it a portal or a secret door. Or I guess secret's not the right word. What you do is you take a file and you create an alias. And the easiest way to do this is you right-click on them. And when you right-click, the menu that opens, one of them is Make Alias. On Windows, it would say Create Shortcut. And when you do this, it makes a second file that is a link to the original file. So you're not actually copying the file or the folder. You're just creating a portal to it. And that portal can be put anywhere on your computer. Now, I've been using aliases on my Mac for years and years, and I don't know why I've never mentioned them sooner. It's just one of those things, I do it automatically, and I never think about it. But it does make my file management and my productivity easier through using them. Let me give you an example. On my Mac, I've got the dock at the bottom, and sometimes, as you know, you keep adding things to the dock and it gets a little overwhelming. You end up with 50 or 70 or 100 different icons in your dock, and then it becomes really hard to find things. So what I did is for any graphic program that I don't use on a regular basis, so I'm not talking about InDesign, Quark Express, Illustrator, Photoshop, but all the little things, such as Vecto Raster that I talked about last week or a couple of weeks ago as the resource of the week, or ArtText 3D, which is a fun little program for doing fancy things with type. These are programs that I don't use on a regular basis. I might not use them on a weekly basis, maybe once a month, once every 2 months, but I do use them from time to time. So what I do with these is I create a folder, which I have it labeled just design apps, and I create aliases of all these programs. So I go to each program, I right click and I say make alias, and I put all these aliases in this one folder. And then this one folder, I put it down in my dock. Now, whenever you put a folder in your dock on a Mac, I'm not sure how it works on Windows, but on a Mac, the folders go towards the right-hand side. So the side where your trash can is, that's where you can put your folders in there. And then there's a vertical bar that divides the folders from all the other icons for your apps. Well, those folders, when you click on them in the dock, they open up and they reveal what's in them. So in this case, when I click on my graphics apps folder in my dock, it pops up with a list of all the graphic apps that I put in there. So now I don't have to go to an applications folder. I don't have to click through a bunch of things. They're available right through my dock. And I open up and I can see, and they're all listed alphabetical. And I just have the ones there I need. Now, there's applications that I might only need once a year or something like that. I don't bother with them in there. Those are just the ones that I might need on a semi-regular basis, but I don't need them enough for them to merit taking real estate up on my actual dock. So that's one way to use aliases. Another thing that I do is I have a folder that's called clients. And as you can guess, that folder has every client that I work with in it. They each have their own folder within, but they're all listed there alphabetically. But the problem is some of those clients I'm working on stuff right now, and some of those clients I might not have worked with for a year, 6 months, more than a year. and some of them possibly even longer. So what I have is at the top of that list of clients, I have a folder called Jobs in Progress. And what I do to put it at the top, first of all, a little trick, is I put a hyphen at the beginning. So it's hyphen Jobs in Progress. And then what that hyphen does is alphabetically, it puts it right at the top of the list. So I always know that folder's at the top. And then what I do is all clients that I have a current active job on right now, that's something I'm working, either a website or a logo or a brochure, whatever. If I have a client that I'm currently have an active project, I make an alias of that client folder and put it into the Jobs in Progress folder. So now I know that I don't have to go hunting through my list of clients. That if I look through here, I have there's 158 clients in my list here. Now, of course, some of these clients, as I said, they're clients I'm not doing stuff with. They're past clients, not. But instead of having to scroll through to find the client I'm currently working with, I just put an alias into that Jobs in Progress folder. And then I know that whenever I need to start working on a project, I just go to the Jobs in Progress. It has all the clients that I'm currently have active projects on. And then by clicking on a client in that Jobs in Progress folder, because it's an alias, it actually portals me to the actual client folder, which is in my client list. So it makes it very convenient to get where I need fast. Now, the best thing about this is once a project is done, it's been invoiced, it's over, I'm no longer working on it, I just go in and delete that alias. I don't have to move files or transfer anything. I just delete the alias and it's no longer part of my Jobs in Progress. Now, the great thing with aliases is that folder that I have at the top, Jobs in Progress, which is not an alias, it's an actual folder full of aliases, I can now make an alias of it and put it down in my doc as well. So right next to the folder that I told you about a while ago that says Design Apps, I have another folder that says Jobs in Progress. So I can quickly, from my doc, access all the client folders for things that I'm currently working on. So that's just a couple of ways that I use aliases on a regular basis to speed up my productivity. I mentioned in episode 22, which was all about file management, I mentioned how I have a folder on my computer just called Logos. It should be called Logos and Icons, but it's just called Logos. And in that folder, I have every single logo that I own in there. Now, why do I do this? Because I don't have to go hunting through hundreds and hundreds of folders to find different logos. So when I say every logo, it would be every client logo I have. Now, in the cases of client logos, this is where the alias thing comes in again. I don't actually have, like, say, for example, my local Chamber of Commerce, they're a client. Well, I have in the Chamber of Commerce folder, I have one called Chamber of Commerce logo. And all their logos that do with the chamber are in that folder, in the clients folder. Then I make an alias of that Chamber of Commerce logo folder, and I move it into my logos folder. Now, some of the folders within that logos folder are alias and some of them are not. So in cases like here, I'm looking at it, I've got A&W restaurants. You may be familiar with them. I've got the A&W logo. I don't have A&W as a client, but every once in a while, I might have to use the A&W logo on a project. Maybe A&W is sponsoring something, a local marathon or a theater production or something, and I have to include their logo. So the A&W logo is there. So I've got a folder in there with the A&W logo. But then the local Chamber of Commerce might be sponsoring something and I need their logo. I have an alias of theirs because their logo is actually sitting in the client folder. But in my logos folder, with every logo I have an alias to take me to that folder. So I can easily go to my logos folder and find every single logo that I have on my computer. And I mentioned earlier that it's also icons. So I have icons for stuff like the Wi-Fi icon. Some people want to say, like, we have free Wi-Fi. So I have that. I have icons for washrooms. I have icons for phones and fax and email. So if somebody has a design and they want to put a little icon of a phone next to their phone number or a little icon of an email next to their email address, that sort of thing. I have the logos and icons for Facebook, for Twitter, for Instagram, and all the social medias. All of them are kept in one convenient place. And I use aliases to keep track of different logos in that one folder without having to make duplicates. And that's the great thing about aliases, is it prevents the duplicate file thing because, again, it's just a portal. It's a placeholder that when clicked upon will take you to the actual file or actual folder. And it surprises me, as I said earlier, it really surprises me how few people take advantage of this powerful, powerful feature that both Mac and Windows come with. And if you're not using them, you really should look into how they can speed up your process, make it easier to access files, no more digging down through directories to find what you need. You create aliases and it gives you easy access. That jobs in progress one that I've got an alias in my doc. I have an alias of it in the sidebar of the Windows, so the favorites bar. I also have an alias of it on the top left-hand side of my desktop. So you can create multiple aliases. That means that from wherever I am, I can access that. I can go down to my dock and access those jobs. I can click on my desktop. I can click on the sidebar in any Finder window, and they all take me back to that one folder because that's what they do. They're a portal to the original. So that's this week's tip of the week, using aliases on Mac or shortcuts on Windows to better manage your files and just to make you more proficient in finding the files and folders you need to on a regular basis. So I hope you find that tip useful. And now, signs you should raise your design rates. Now, before I actually get into the indicators that you should raise your rates, I want to share with you a quick way of determining how much you should be charging, just to kind of give you an idea of where things stand with you and the industry. So in order to calculate your design rate, let's say you want to make $60,000 per year. That's a nice round figure. It's a very realistic number when it comes to home-based or freelance designers. 60,000 is very achievable. A lot of people strive to get to that area, and a lot of designers, freelancers, and that make a lot more than that. But we'll use that as a nice round number. Now, of course, with $60,000 a year, you won't be living a life of luxury, but you can live a very comfortable life on that income. Now, to put that in perspective, if you were an employee working for someone else, you would need to have an hourly wage of $28.85 in order to make $60,000 annually. But you're not an employee getting paid for 8-hour days, 5 days per week. You're a home-based designer, a freelancer if you want to use that term. And there's nothing steady about a freelancer's income. So let's say, as a home-based designer, you want to make $60,000 per year. What do you need to charge as an hourly rate? Well, there are 260 weekdays in the year once you eliminate the weekends. And let's say you plan on taking 3 weeks holidays out of the year. So that eliminates 15 days from that. And we'll throw in, say, an extra 10 days just for miscellaneous thing like sick days, medical appointments, or whatever. So in all, you're going to take 25 days off each year. So that leaves you with 235 working days per year. Now, during an 8-hour workday, freelance designers work roughly 4.5 actual billable hours. Now, that's an average. I read that on some sites. Some designers work more, some designers work less, but the average is 4.5 billable hours per day. So we'll use that average. So that gives us, at 235 working days, 4.5 billable hours, that gives us 1,057.5 billable hours per year. So if you want to make $60,000 per year, you divide that by the billable hours, and that works out to $56.74 per hour. So let's round that up to $57 per hour. And that would be your hourly rate to charge for your design services. Now, you should listen to episode 115 of the podcast, where you'll hear me explain why I suggest you don't charge by the hour. But if that's the way you do, you need to charge at least $57 per hour if you want to reach $60,000 per year. Now, I just want to put that out there for you to see where you currently stand. If you're charging less than $57 per hour, then you're not making $60,000. And if you're charging more than that, there's a possibility you're making over 60. Again, it all depends on the hours. That's based on 4.5 billable hours per day, every day for the year. And if you can say that, then good for you. But today's topic is not about hourly rates and all that. It's about raising your rates and knowing when you should be doing so. So I want to share 10 indicators that it's actually time for you to raise your rates right now. Now, number one is you're super busy and you're actually starting to feel overwhelmed. I read several articles in preparation for today's episode. I read articles on Forbes, on Entrepreneur, on Inc.com, Business Weekly, and a whole bunch of others. and every single one of them say the same thing. If you have a backlog of projects or a waiting list of clients, or you just feel overwhelmed because you're so busy with the work you have, that's a key sign that you're not charging enough for your services. And they all state that by raising your rate and being more selective with who you work with, because the problem is you're overwhelmed because you're getting a lot of the low ball clients because your rates are too low. So by raising your rates and becoming more selective with who you work with, it'll lessen that feel of overwhelm, but the higher prices you're charging will make up for any loss you incur from any client leaving you. So it balances out. But it's funny that in almost all cases, that was the number one reason to raise your rates, is that you are feeling really busy and you're starting to feel overwhelmed with work. Now, the second indication that you should raise your rates is that you're attracting undesirable clients. It could be that you're attracting the type of client that doesn't put much value in what you do. Those that want it all, but are not willing to pay very much for it. Clients that micromanage you. They complain and they criticize about your work, or they tell you how to do your job. These are all clients that would leave you for a competitor in a heartbeat just to save a couple of bucks. If that sounds like the type of client you're currently working with, then raising your rates can take care of this problem for you. Those clients will stop bothering you and go look for a less expensive solution. And you will attract new clients that are willing to pay your higher prices. Clients that will trust and value your services more and are likely to stay loyal, even if a lower cost option presents itself. It's been proven over and over again. You raise your rates, you will attract better clients. So if you don't like the type of clients, and I'm not saying they're not nice people, but I'm just saying if they're the type of people that don't let you do your job properly, they're the type of people that micromanage or try to dictate what the design will look like, if that's the type of client you have, that's a clear indication you need to raise your prices. Now, indication number 3 is you're not winning the clients that you do want to work with. If people are reaching out to you, but they're not hiring you, it might very well be because your rates are too low. Now, a lot of people automatically think they probably thought I was too expensive. But no, it can be the opposite. When someone is expecting to pay a certain amount for a project, and you quote them a price much lower than they expected, red flags go up for them, and they start wondering if perhaps you're not good enough or you don't have the experience for what they need. They start thinking about all sorts of deficiencies that justify your low prices. In a blog article I wrote a while back that was titled, "It's Time to Raise Your Design Rates," I explained an experience that happened to me. This is earlier when I started my business, I was replying to a lot of requests for proposals from businesses that needed design work. And these were businesses in Montreal, in Ottawa, in Toronto. And I kept submitting quote after quote after quote, and I wasn't winning anything. And then after not winning, I started inquiring about what happened. And I was told that the reason I wasn't getting the jobs was because my quotes were coming in way, way lower than everybody else's. And people weren't taking my prices seriously. They thought that I didn't understand the request for proposal, or that I just didn't know what I was doing when it came to pricing. But the fact was that I live in a smaller town, so I had very little overhead compared to these other places. And I thought I was competing that way, but I was losing out. So when I did eventually raise my prices and started quoting much higher on these proposals, I started winning more and more of them. So if you're currently losing more clients than you're actually landing, consider raising your prices, because there's a good chance the reason you're losing them is because they don't think you're worth it. Now, indication number 4 that you should be raising your rates is if you start offering a new service. Let's say you take an online course or you go to school somewhere and you learn something new. Let's say video editing or 3D animation or something like that. And you decide to add it to your toolbox of services you offer. Well, that sort of thing makes you more valuable to potential clients. And because of that, you should raise your rates to indicate that better value. The convenience of getting more services from you instead of having to hire you for one thing and then go find somebody else to hire for a different project than that, if they can get everything done through you, that's worth extra money to the client, and they'd be willing to spend more for that. So anytime that you offer additional services, something new, consider raising your rates at the same time because you've just become more valuable to them. Now, another indication that you should be raising your rates is if you are currently price matching your competition. One strategy I see amongst freelancers is to find out what their competition is charging and charge the same thing, or sometimes even try to undercut them. Well, this only works if the service you offer is equal or inferior to your competition's. But if you believe that you're a better designer than your local competition, then your rates should indicate that you're a better designer by being higher. From a client's perspective, a designer charging $3,000 for a website must be a better web designer than one who charges $2,000 for a website. And for some clients, they don't care. But a lot of clients, they want the best, and they won't hesitate to pay the $3,000 for a website over the $2,000. So don't try to match your competition or undercut them. Charge higher and show that you are a better value. You're a better designer than them. Now, on the flip side to what I just shared in number 5 is number 6. Your competition charges much higher than you. If that's the case, if your prices are lower than your competition's prices, then you'll actually start getting a reputation of being a cheap designer. And you don't want to be the cheapest designer around because that's definitely not a good thing. Because when you're viewed as the cheapest, you'll never be taken seriously by anybody. So if your competition is charging much higher rates than you are, then you should definitely be raising yours as well. Now, keep in mind when I say competition, I'm talking locally. You should always be basing your prices locally. Yes, the idea is to work on a global market. I personally have clients all around the globe, but determine the prices for where you live. I know that designers in New York City charge a lot more than I do, but I'm not going to start raising my prices to them because cost of living and just different situations. So I have my prices set for what I need to support myself and then some. And you're just going to create a huge headache for yourself if you start thinking as the whole world of your competition. So when it comes to competition, just look locally. Because no matter where you set your client base, whether it's regional, local, regional, across the country or across the globe, when you're starting out especially, the bulk of your clients will be local. So that's how you set your prices. Now, the 7th indication that you should be increasing your rates is when the cost of doing business goes up. Face it, inflation is as sure a thing as death and taxes. And in order to remain profitable, you need to match that inflation rate with the money you bring in. So keep track of your business expenses year after year. Look at your tax return and see what sort of expenses you had, and make sure you compensate for those expenses as they increase with a price increase. So if the cost of business has gone up, so should your prices. Now, the 8th indication that it's time to raise your prices is if you haven't raised your prices in over a year. This was another thing that was mentioned in all the places on Entrepreneur, on Forbes, on Inc., on Business Weekly, and many others. This was one that was included on all their lists. If you haven't raised your prices in over a year, it's time to do so. The best strategy you can employ when it comes to raising your prices is to raise them a little bit every year. If you wait too long before increasing your prices, you'll either, one, not be able to increase them in the amount that you really need to in order to keep up with inflation and everything, the business expenses and all that, or you will increase them the way you need to, but it'll be a huge impact on your clients. Think of it from this point of view. It's much easier for a client to accept a 5% price increase from you every year over the course of, let's say, 5 years, than it is for them to accept a 25% price increase because you kept the same prices for the past 5 years. If you lock in your prices and you haven't updated them in several years, you're going to have to increase them by a lot more now in order to get on par with everything else. And that could be a big blow to some clients. But a small 5% increase every year, they won't even notice that. Now, number 9, when it comes to indications that it's time to raise your price, is if you've decided to niche. Now, I covered niches or niches, depending on how you want to say it, in episode 54 and 93 of the podcast. Those are great episodes if you want to go back and listen to them. But the gist of it is that by choosing a niche, you're establishing yourself as an expert in that area, regardless of what the niche is. As an expert, you deserve to be paid more for your services. Why do you think doctors with specialties make more money than general practitioners do? It's the demand and the perceived value. The same goes for auto mechanics. You can have general auto mechanics that are charging a certain amount, but then you get a specialty mechanic who deals only with Volkswagens or only with Jaguars or only with Mercedes-Benz. If that's all they work on, they're going to charge a much higher rate than the auto mechanic that can work on any car because of the demand for them and the perceived value of what they offer. They specialize, and that's what happened when you niche. You become a specialist in your area and you can charge higher prices for it. So if at some point in your design career you decide to niche down, that definitely merits a price increase. And finally, the 10th indication that it's time to raise your rates is if you actually tried charging a higher price and you got the job. It's a perfect way to see if a rate increase is in order, is to actually test it out. Let's say you normally charge, $600 for a logo design. Well, the next time somebody comes to you for a logo, quote them $800. Go through the same process of everything you would do, but instead of saying 600, say 8, and see what happens. If the client agrees, that's a really, really good indication that a price increase won't deter the market you're going after. That's the way I've been raising my prices over the years. Every time I decide I want to raise my price, I just quote somebody, the next person that comes in for something, I quote them a little bit higher. And if I get the job, then I know, okay, those new prices are good, and that becomes my new standard. And remember at the beginning where I showed you how to calculate what your hourly rate should be? Remember that a lot of this pricing is not based on an hourly rate. Sometimes it's fixed prices like $600 for a logo and now charging $800, or even value pricing or project-based pricing, whatever pricing strategy you use. And you could listen to episode 11 to learn more on pricing strategies for your design business. But whatever strategy you use, you can increase the rate. So those are 10 indications or signs that you should raise your design prices. I'll just go over them again quickly. Number 1, if you're super busy and you're starting to feel overwhelmed, raise your prices. If you're attracting undesirable clients, raise your prices. If you're not winning the clients that you really want to work with, raise your prices. If you start offering new services, raise your prices. If you're price matching your competition or trying to undercut them, raise your prices. If your competition charges much higher than you do, then raise your prices. If the cost of doing business has increased and you're now losing money because of it, raise your prices. If you haven't raised your prices in over a year, now's the time to do it. If you've niched down, you should be charging higher for your specialty. And finally, if you tried charging a higher rate and you still got the job, it's the perfect indication that you should be charging higher. So what does it all come down to? Well, this. If you're not charging what you're truly worth, you are doing your current and your potential clients a disservice. Being the lowest or second lowest designer in your market has absolutely no advantages to you. It's great for the cheapo clients looking to hire from the bottom of the barrel, but that does no good for you. In fact, it can actually dig you into a hole that will be very difficult to get out of because you will be viewed as that cheap lowball designer, and that's a reputation that's hard to expunge. Instead, you should be trying to price yourself above average when it comes to your local competition. And even better, you should be one of the top priced when it comes to your competition. Don't necessarily have to be the highest one, but you should be up there near the top. And if you're not there now, do something about it. And don't worry about increasing your prices. Everybody does it. In fact, if you don't increase your prices, you'll be falling behind as the price of things like fuel for your car, your utility bills, your groceries, your clothing, daycare, restaurants, your hobbies, all of those things that are your day-to-day necessities go up in price on a regular basis. And you need to do the same so that you are not falling behind. Plus, there's all the benefits that come from raising your prices. I've said it over and over in this episode. Higher prices attract higher quality clients. It's a case of you get what you pay for, and some clients are willing to invest in the best. Your clients will better value your work. Lower priced designers are simply a body for hire, easily replaceable. But when you charge premium prices, clients will treat you with respect, and they will trust your authority and your opinion. Your clients will get better results. Designers who charge more tend to work with fewer clients. This allows them to devote more time and energy on each project, resulting in better results for those clients. And you get to build better relationships with your clients because, again, you have fewer clients to deal with, and because the clients will better value your work, and because they will see better results from what you give them, you'll start building better relationships with them. And better relationships translates into more recurring work from those clients and more referrals. And finally, charging higher prices will actually boost your confidence and your self-worth. You'll start feeling good about what you're doing. Believe me, once you start charging premium prices and start landing those new clients, you will feel great about yourself. And the great thing is that confidence and that self-worth that you'll start feeling will eventually come out whenever you're networking, you're promoting yourself, you're marketing yourself. People will take note. They'll see that you're discussing your business with more confidence. You feel good about yourself. You're holding yourself higher whenever you're talking to them. And they'll appreciate that, and it'll make them want to work with you even more. So what are you waiting for? Have you seen any of the indications that I mentioned today? Do any of them pertain to you and your business? If so, then raise your rates today. There's nothing to say that you can't do it now. You don't have to wait for a certain date or the beginning of the month or the beginning of the year. You can raise your rates today. It just takes you deciding that as of right now, I'm going to charge more for my services. And believe me, you're worth it. Now, I would love to know what differences, if you did raise your rates at any time, what differences did you notice happen with your business? Let me know. Leave a comment for this episode at resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 201 and let me know how raising your rates affected you. And I know this can be a scary thing, especially if times are tough and you're finding it difficult to get clients, or you're new to the industry, you're just starting out. But raising your rates doesn't have to be a huge jump. You can start with small increments. Raise your hourly rate by $5. Or your fixed rate. If you charge $200 for a logo, try charging $225 and see what happens. And if you get a client, then the next one, charge a little bit higher and keep trying until you get the rate that you deserve. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you take this to heart and actually follow through. I also hope that you decide to check out aliases or shortcuts on Windows and see how they can speed up your productivity and help you better manage your files. So give it a try. Let me know how it's working out for you. You can always send me an email at feedback@resourcefuldesigner.com. And if you do have any questions for the podcast, I would love to bring back the question of the week. Just fill out the form at resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback, and I'll answer yours on the podcast. And finally, if you want to join a group of like-minded designers who want to help and grow your business with you, consider joining the Resourceful Designer community at resourcefuldesigner.com/community. Well, I thank you very much. I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your design business and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.